You have a right to kill your baby, but you do not have a right to use your car. You have a right to destroy an unborn boy who is an African American in your womb, but you do not have a right to get into your car and go from your house to your church. You do not have a right, according to Neil Pinkston, the DA, you do not have a right to get into your car and go to a meeting of the Democratic Party caucus, the state caucus. You do not have a right to do that. No, you cannot do that without our permission. You do not have a right to get into your car with your parents and take your mother back to her nursing home where she resides. You do not have a right to, as a member of the press, to go to an interview from your office out 20 miles to the countryside where the story at a farm is being conducted by way of interview. You do not have a right to do that, according to Neil Pinkston, the district attorney. But Neil Pinkston is not saying anything that the judges of our state are not saying as well. He's not saying anything that Governor Bill Haslam, the Republican, is not saying as well. You can kill your baby, but you do not have a right to get into a car that you've paid for and go from point A to point B without our permission, without a permit, without paying a tax to use that instrumentality, that machine. You cannot do that without our permission. And if you do, I, Neil Pinkston, will uphold the Constitution. I, Neil Pinkston, a political figure in Chattanooga, I will enforce the Tennessee Code annotated against you, and I will haul you into jail, and I will accuse you as a criminal because you used your own car on the people's roads and went to a religious meeting. I will prosecute you if you do that. Neil Pinkston, that's what I'm going to do. That's what he's telling you. That's what Neil Pinkston is telling you, my listener. Now, I don't expect you to be too upset about that because you've heard that your whole life, and you're used to this sort of high-handed discussion. You do not have this right, and you do not have that right. We have 120 years of precedent, Mr. Pinkston tells me, in a bit of correspondence, of upholding that there is no distinction between travel and transportation, even though, as I have given him notice, the law is very clear. There is a distinction legally between travel and transportation. And he says, no, there is no constitutional right to travel. There is only a constitutional right to travel from one state to the other and changing your domicile. That's all that travel means. Travel does not mean anything but that. You have a right to move from one state to another, and we cannot impede you. That is travel. And what has happened here is that a very common word, a word that has a legal significance as well, has by legal fiction and a kind of fraud, it has deprived you, and more importantly, has deprived poor people, immigrants, and minorities, and orphans and widows of an important right. And because those people do not know how to be belligerent claimants in person, because they do not know how to defend themselves, we have the high hand of the sheriff. We have the high hand of David Roddy, the chief of police, and his PIO, Rob Simmons, all telling us that, well, we're just going to arrest you and charge you as a criminal. And if you can't make bail, we'll tough. The magistrate's going to put a 500 on you, and you don't have 50. Well, sorry, you're just going to have to stay in jail until your trial. And the jail, that hellhole, a hellhole, if there ever was one downtown, a hellhole, probably not quite as bad as the one in Bradley County overseen by the sheriff there, who is also seeking re-election. Both of them equally bad. And we're going to put you in that hellhole. You do not have a right to go to your church service without my permission, but you do have a right to kill your baby. And before the governor right now, according to the Times Free Press headline on page 1 this morning, the governor's weighing anti-abortion measure. I think that the story is about the changing of the funding. State government gladly funded for years and years the baby killing machine called Planned Parenthood, and Governor Haslam is weighing that. Should we continue to give state funds to Planned Parenthood, which destroys black people disproportionately more than white? Or should these funds go to local health departments? That's kind of the issue. And Governor Haslam, a Republican who has done nothing to save the life of a single unborn child, will consider putting a signature on that very bold and courageous pro-life bill that has come out of the General Assembly. This is David Toulis, and we are all for undocumented separatists. I use that word because it comes across the wire this morning in the Wall Street Journal pertaining to the group called the Uyghurs in China. They are a Muslim minority, and they are, according to the Wall Street Journal, facing a squeeze. They are separatists. They want to be left alone, and they even in their exiles, they are under harassment by President Xi Jinping. According to Human Rights Watch, the story moving this morning in the Wall Street Journal, Beijing squeezes exiles in U.S. by detaining family back home. Female relatives are told that they are being interrogated by Chinese men in blue because we hadn't gone back to China and were involved in separatist activities, according to Mr. Hamut, who is living away from China. Police in Xinjiang have ordered this poet's latest work removed from bookstores. People in China are telling Mr. Hamut the friends are now too afraid to talk with him. He said several other Uyghurs abroad said family members in Xinjiang had disappeared or been taken to new detention facilities, right? New public security facilities, right? Some reported being called by Chinese police or contacted on social media and warned not to criticize the Chinese government. Having relatives abroad is one factor that can lead Uyghurs to be labeled as unsafe. That would be dissenters, right? If you're a dissenter, you're called unsafe, and thus a candidate for detention. And that those labels are come through the major data management organizations, like we have Google and Facebook. Here, there's one in China that will prevent you from gaining any ground or gaining capital or jobs or access to university classrooms because you've done the wrong things enough times to have your social value index reduced. David Toulis here, and national governments and even state governments are using the digital economy to harass people. And I want to say something, unless you want to talk about something else, something about the local economy solutions. And I'm trying to get a meeting with Andy Burke to tell part of what there's a part of the story here that needs to be discussed with the mayor. And I'm not going to tell you what it is here. Okay, I'm not telling you what it is here. But on the whole, what I'd like to propose, as I have done at Nuganomics.com and YourNews.com, our sponsor, is a local economy solution to a national problem, and that is what Bruce Katz in his book, The New Localism, discusses. And how does localism work in an era of populism? That's one of the themes of that policy book that was widely promoted a couple months ago. Bruce Katz here in town to talk about the new localism and what that means. And Mayor Burke seeing many good things in it. But part of the argument touches on this whole question about the abuse of the transportation Title 55. That is to say, that the traffic law, the driver's license law, specifically in that title. And I'm proposing that we please all the Democratic and all the Republican, all the liberal and all the conservative constituencies by going right down the middle. Just as Mayor Burke's probably his genetic ancestors, the Khazars, did. They went right down the middle between Christianity and Islam back in the 9th century, and from whom many modern Jews come. They come from the Khazars in far eastern Europe or Western Asia, and here a mayor or it could be a county mayor, it could be the mayor, it could be Mayor Llewellyn of Dayton, could all do the same thing, and that is to go right down the middle between two competing claims, and that would be on the question of liberating the people in that jurisdiction of a false oppression, of an oppression, a true oppression, but one done under false labeling, and that would be Title 55, the traffic law enforcement. And you're saying, good grief, David, I know you're a libertarian, but you're saying there shouldn't be any traffic laws. Well, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there shouldn't be enforcement of traffic laws against people who are not involved in traffic, right? Traffic and transportation are synonyms in the law and in court cases and in the statute, Tennessee Code annotated. If you're involved in traffic and transportation, that means you are a driver, that means you're an operator, and those terms imply that you're doing something in particular, namely, you are involved in the moving of goods or people for hire, and you're a carrier of some kind. There are two main types of carriers, and you're one or the other. Other people on the road are not in that category, either category, or the category of transportation or traffic at all. And those are just people who are called private people, right? Common people, citizens, private individuals, and they are not subject to the law. And yet the state, which reaps millions of dollars annually, millions of dollars every year through overbroad enforcement, will not let this system die, and it will not stop it. And so we have a state problem. The problem is Nashville and the downflow from Nashville of policy. That would be policy from the Supreme Court, which upholds current practice, downflow from the Republican Party, which today holds the governorship, Bill Haslam, and also the General Assembly, where all the members are simply oblivious to the problem that they have created with their statutes and their refusal to even consider any reform. Reform bill is impossible. There's no way.
$1 million of debt, and they're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. Get the information you need for free right now before the.
Sorry, my left hand does not know what my right hand is doing, so forgive me. But there's no constituency for a reform. So a reform would be that the mayor of Chattanooga goes down between the law, which favors liberty, and the establishment, which favors its opinions in the high court, which disfavor liberty, and have effectively rendered an unconstitutional statute constitutional. Here's the question: Did the Driver's License Act of 1937 destroy a constitutional right? If it forbade private travel, then it's unconstitutional because it destroyed a constitutionally guaranteed right that everybody says was there prior in 1936, right? 1935 and on back. If the statute is constitutional and it covers only transportation, which is what it does, then it's constitutional, and it cannot be shown or seen or understood to be obviating or destroying the private rights of the people. If it's constitutional, it's narrow. If it's unconstitutional, it's broad. In other words, if it's broad, it's unconstitutional. So which is it? Do you want a constitutional statute, Nashville and Mayor and Sheriff Hammond and DA attorney? Do you want a constitutional statute? Well, then enforce it narrowly as it's supposed to be enforced. Do you want the statute to be unconstitutional? Well, continue enforcing it as you are now. The problem there, though, is this. The high court will not hear any appeals on this issue. It just simply will not. And so we have a problem that cannot be solved. It cannot be solved legally, even though Jay Hirsch, the most recent appellant in the issue, has filed the most remarkable suit probably in state history, which is seeking a void judgment for fraud petition in Chancery Court in Lawrence County. And then a very unusual suit that has not been reported anywhere. But you can hear about it here on the David Tula Show because I know about this case. A void judgment for fraud suit in Chancery, where equity voids law, and that is possible according to Gibson's suits in Chancery, the very famous treatise on Chancery jurisdiction. It could happen. It could be done if Judge Parks is brave, right over there in Middle Tennessee. But there's no. Let's just say that aside, there's no solution nationally and in the state. There's no solution legally. It can't happen. So what we've done is we've got this project. It is a racial reconciliation project by David Tulis, your host here, and I'm trying to benefit local economy and the free market, and particularly those most abused by the statute. And it puts in the crosshairs, if you will, the local deputy and cop. And what we want here is that the officer uphold his oath, that he uphold his oath to obey the Constitution and honor the rights of the people and respect the rights of the people and fear to tread on them. And that's what we want from the officer. What is notice actually say? You are bound by it because your superior was notified. If you're in the county or the city of Chattanooga, your superiors have been notified of this important legal distinction, and you are legally bound by it. So the question is personal responsibility of the officer. he either takes his own initiative to find out what the law is by reading the notice, or he is told about it from his superiors. Either way, since he legally has been notified, he is responsible personally, and he's personally liable if he offends somebody's constitutionally guaranteed rights if properly asserted, right, by a belligerent claimant in person. 800-8949 is the number, 800-8949. Look, let's change the topic. I think maybe we should change the topic. But what I want you to think about is this. You have rights that are innumerable. You have many, many rights. And how do you assert them? You have so many rights. And we complain sometimes about the high court finding rights. And we say, well, wow, they found the Roe v. Wade judges and the church-going Christian judges, all from established churches, who ruled on Roe v. Wade to kill millions of children. They said, well, we find the right of abortion in the penumbras of the Constitution. Well, that's kind of silly, because the Constitution doesn't even pretend to name all the rights. It has 10 amendments. There were several amendments after that, the initial 10. But your rights as someone made in God's image are innumerable, right? They're put there in your person by God. They're recognized in the Constitution, guaranteed in the Constitution. They're unalienable to you personally. And they inhere in you. They notice they kind of belong to you as a man. You, my listener, as a man or as a woman, right? If you're tuning in for us just for a minute, it is kind of the guy show. I know we talk a lot about law, never about sports though. A lot about law here. David Toulis. So can we, if we understand that rights are innumerable and that no court can restrict them, even though the courts have done in practice and the enforcement is in practice, you have these rights, and so you need to assert them. And what we're counting on in the near future is a conflict between a victim of police enforcement and a local officer. This is David Toulis, caller. You're live on the air. What's on your mind?
Did you ever hear of the product called "I Can't Believe It's Not Butter"?
Yes.
We don't know what it is, but we know it's not butter. Butter has to be bad, so we're going to eat it. It's the same thing with race. I can't believe that two guys can't get married. I can't believe it. So we have to make it a right. I can't believe a woman can't kill her unborn baby. Oh, let's make it a right. I can't believe people are walking around defending their homes and their properties. I can't believe it. Well, we'll make it a privilege. That's like the old "I can't believe it's not butter" commercial.
I'm not following you, Mike. Explain what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that none of these things government claims are rights or rights. What they do is they go over and above what the Constitution claims as an enumerated right and grant it as a privilege. It comes down to jurisdiction. It's all about jurisdiction.
What do you mean?
To compel you to do or not do something. And I've won on this case in not having a driver's license because I argue jurisdiction. By what authority are you doing this? Prove it. You have to prove it. If you say I need to be in this court, prove I need to be in this court. If you say I need to have a driver's license, prove I'm driving. At one time they wanted me to pay a tax using dollars when the state specifically had a law claiming they can only receive gold, silver, or redeemable currency. So they asked the judge, what dollars do you want? Define what you want. They couldn't do it because they knew that if they defined what they want jurisdictionally, they'd be putting me in a position to violate my due process of law and equal protection of the law. If you argue statute, you will always lose because they're the referees in the baseball game that will say, well, you know what? 3 outs, you're not out. We'll make it 4 strikes, you're out. We'll make it 5 strikes, you're out. They change the rules of the game by lying about what you're arguing. That's what they do. They'll add a little something that lies about what you're arguing. It's called set up a straw man to find you guilty, and now you have what's called a precedent-setting case, whereby the lower court judges won't even hear it. So if you argue jurisdiction or you argue by what authority are you doing this, you're always starting fresh under the 14th and 4th Amendments. Always argue jurisdiction. That's my opinion.
And you're saying that the officer who arrested my listener had no jurisdiction? Is that how did he obtain jurisdiction, or how is it that the listener does not have?
We're not talking about the officer doing it. The cop is judge, jury, executioner. He's statutory judge, jury, executioner, not the sheriff. But the police officer is a statutory judge, jury, and executioner. When you get in front of the judge, if you don't have a driver's license, registration, insurance, if your car is junk titled, and you're just in your property going from point A to point B. They have to show jurisdiction. By what authority does this apply to me? Why am I in this court? Okay, you drug me in here, but I am not arguing this case until you show me you have authority over this issue. Where's subject matter jurisdiction? And then you have jurisdiction over me because it's in Versado, because I'm here. But where's the subject matter jurisdiction? I'm not granting it. I'm denying it. I'm not going to argue with this until you show me subject matter jurisdiction. That applies to me.
Right, and that's what's happened in these cases. This is David Tillis, who's been talking with Mike. The state has rejected any discussion about subject matter jurisdiction in a Christian common man saying, I have a right to travel. The court will not hear this case, so we're stuck. And I think only a local economy solution of the kind I'm proposing might work. David Tillis.